Josh was a unique baby. He learned to do things early, and he was so much fun. And that's the kind of child he was. He was very inquisitive and wanted to know how things were.
He loved to go exploring, and if there were heavy machines like bulldozers and earth movers, he would watch those. And one afternoon, we drove down to where they were doing work like that, and he and I were sitting on the hood of the car watching this guy on the bulldozer, and he was just in awe. And the bulldozer guy, he didn't cut it off, but he put it in neutral or something and hopped down and came over and said, would he like to ride on the bulldozer?
One of the things that Josh and I used to do, like James said, he loved watching heavy equipment. And there's a lot of construction in Stone Mountain, so we would take our lunch and go and park and just watch the bulldozers and things. And he could sit there for hours just watching the heavy equipment move and all the things they were doing. He would ask questions, and he had the toys at home, and he would mimic what he saw and just loved the equipment. And I think that's why he loved the Humvee and things in the Army.
He never really got much into group sports or team sports. One summer he decided he wanted to play baseball. And I reminded him, I said, now Josh, you've never played on a league before. And a lot of these guys that's going to be on your team have been doing this for a long time. So they're going to be better than you, and that's okay, because you're going to be better with them at something, but it's probably not going to be baseball. He said, that's okay. And so I signed him up. He made the team, and they put him in center field as almost to the fence, because he was picking the daisies and playing with the dandelions and watching the butterflies, and he did that for pretty much half the season. And he said, Daddy, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't like baseball. I said, well, that's okay that you don't like it, but you signed up and you told the team that you were going to be part of the team. Do you really want to quit? He went, no. Well, yes, but I'm not going to quit.
He was a good big brother too. He looked out for Jared, and I remember one time they were playing in the front yard, and one of our friends' son was playing with them and was kind of pushing Jared around, and Josh got up in his face and told him to quit doing that or he was going to sock him in the nose. They were just 5 years old, and I can't imagine how he could sock somebody in the nose and have it hurt them, but the other kid backed off and left Jared alone after that. But yeah, I thought it was really cute that he did that.
Hey, I'm Jared Reeves, and I'm here to share a little bit about my brother, Josh. So growing up here in Watkinsville, Georgia, from my perspective, we were typical kids. And we grew up in, actually off Mars Hill Road in a little neighborhood, Brookwood Estates. But anyways, we had the creek, we were always in the woods, we had go-karts and paintball guns. Luckily we didn't shoot BB guns at each other like some of my friends, but we did a lot of outdoor activities at the end of the day. My dad was into camping, so we went hiking and camping a lot, and a lot of cycling. Josh was he was a chill kid growing up, very much into music, and he did like to explore, but I would say that he kind of followed with whatever we were doing. and was very laid back. So I remember him being a kid that just learned whatever he was doing, he just learned how to do it the best that he could, and kind of go with the flow. Josh got really into cycling, got some specialized gear, and when we would do, there's a ride called Bragg, it's a bicycle ride across Georgia. I remember he would kind of leave us in the dust and go on these extra long rides where maybe we might ride 40 miles and he rode 100 that day.
Josh just loved doing the bicycle ride across Georgia.
The bike ride across Georgia is an annual event. It lasts 6 days and it goes across Georgia. You get up when you want and you ride at whatever pace you want. And usually they have, at that time, and I don't know the arrangement, but you spent the night in high schools. Then you could camp around the high school, or you could camp, or you could sleep in the gym, or you could find a classroom off kind of by yourself. This one trip, I believe it was just Josh, Jared, and I, and a really good friend of mine, Richard, and one of his scouts rode. So this was about a 78-mile day. We ended close to Macon, I believe. But anyhow, the rule was at 5 o'clock, because by then everybody should have, in our group, should have been finished. You meet at the flagpole, because every high school's got a flagpole. Well, this one particular day, we're all at the flagpole except for Josh. And it's 5 o'clock. And I thought, okay, well, and then 5:30, and then 5:45. And I was starting to get worried. And it started to rain. And I mean rain, hard rain. And so then I'm starting to get scared, because I'm thinking, okay, is my son on the side of the road somewhere? Did he wreck? Is it because of the weather? And then I hear this lady as she's riding in, and people are kind of clapping. And she's basically singing praises to Josh. Because when he saw me, that's my dad. Well, she came over and she said, you need to know that your son saw that I had a flat tire, and he stopped and he changed it for me. And then he said, I'm going to ride with you all the way in. And she said, no, I don't want you to do that, because I ride really slow. He says, I'm going to ride with you the rest of the way in. And he did, and she had another flat. And it didn't matter which wheel, but it was the other wheel, and he changed it again. And she says, listen, you really get, and he said, ma'am, I'm not leaving. When this happened, Josh was 14-ish, 15, around that age. She just said, I begged him to go. He wouldn't leave me. And she said, quite honestly, I'm glad he didn't, because of that second flat. But I want you to know that he is one of the nicest, most polite kids I've ever met. And she said, I'll be grateful to him for the rest of my life, just for not leaving me behind. And that pretty much encapsulates what kind of guy Josh was.
One day we were doing something around the house, and it was 9/11, and we heard on the news that one of the towers had been crashed into. So I put the news on, and we sat on the corner of my bed and watched the news, and we actually saw the second plane, the second tower, and he was so upset by it that he said, I want to continue homeschooling so I can get done sooner so I can join the Army. He said, I want to go and fight for my country.
My name's Matthew Jones. I'm pastor of First Baptist Church of Middleton, Tennessee. Used to live in Georgia all my life and grew up with Josh Reeves. Yes, I did grow up in Oconee County. We moved there all the way back in 1986. I first met Josh Reeves in 5th grade. Now, he claimed that we met in 4th grade when he moved to Oconee County. I still maintain to this day that it was 5th grade when he and I were in the same class. He saw me in 5th grade as a kid that didn't have a lot of friends, that got picked on a lot. I had actually switched classes in 5th grade because I was being bullied so much. It had gotten to a point where I just didn't want to go to school, didn't care. My grades were suffering. And they switched me from one class to the other, the one that Josh was in. And he didn't hesitate. He wanted to know who I was. He wanted to know what I was about. He wanted to know me. He wanted to help. Joshua Reeves, growing up, was one of the most mischievous people you ever met. He was the kind of person who would say, hey, do you want to do this? And you knew it was probably going to get you in trouble, but you knew it was going to be fun. So you did it anyways. So we were named as 2 of the students that she could not control, which was mortifying to my mother since she worked in the school system. And of course, Mr. James working in schools as well. It's like, how can 2 teachers' children be one? Now, were we disrespectful? Probably. Were we out of control? Not fully, but just, we wouldn't stop talking. We were those kind of friends, you know? And we pull pranks on one another and we just have a good time all the time. 8th grade, they separated us. We would go probably 6 or 8 times a year to various and sundry different reenactments. So, all the way through high school. Josh, of course, was just social butterfly the whole time. He had a ball. We kind of lost contact a little bit after high school got done. Not terribly. It kind of got to a point where we'd call each other, you know, every couple of months. And then he went in the Army, and it became a lot harder to contact him because it was just, you know, it's the way things are when you go military. Especially when you're sent overseas, you just don't have a lot of contact with one another. We had plans to get together after he came back home, after he came back stateside. And of course, those plans got changed. But I thought so much of Josh that when we got pregnant with our first set of twins, we knew one of our children would be named Samuel. It was what my wife had wanted one of our children to be named. But his twin, Samuel's twin, is named Joshua. He is named for Josh Reeves. And my son Joshua is 13. And even though my Joshua, as I call him, never got to meet Josh Reeves, my Joshua lives up to that name quite a bit. Of all 4 of my children, he's the most empathetic. He's the most caring. It's so important to know that he was a living, breathing person who cared so deeply for others. I found out that Josh had been killed in action through a phone call from my mom. Instantly knew something was terribly wrong. I'd only been married for about a month and a half at that point. In fact, the last communication I got from Josh was on Facebook. I don't know if I had convinced him or someone else had convinced him to get on Facebook. And he put on my wedding day, "Have fun." Of course, he was overseas and knew that he was expecting Jackson with Leslie. And we had communicated a little bit, but my eldest brother, BJ, who's 5 years older than me, he still has friends over in the Athens area. And someone had called him saying, "Did you hear what happened to Josh Reeves?" And he called Mom and said, "Mom, you're going to have to call Matt. I can't do it." How could such a bright light be gone? But it's not really fully gone. A life lived like that never fully leaves this world. And if anything in this world is what we need, is more people like Josh Reeves who want to help those who are disadvantaged. He wants to help those that just need that hand. And sometimes to get you in trouble, and sometimes to make fun of you, and sometimes to humble you, and just be a good friend.
He got the FJ. That's an interesting story. He actually went and got it from a person in Alaska. And not everybody knows this, but you can drive all the way to Alaska. And so he drove up. I think it's mostly gravel, if not all gravel road, and picked this vehicle up, actually the one behind me here, and drove it back to Kansas. He was stationed at Fort Riley in Kansas, and he has some pictures. I never actually went to Fort Riley, never visited him out there in Kansas. That just didn't work out with where we were in life. But I know he sent pictures, him and Leslie, his wife, and they have pictures of him driving around in the snow and doing those kind of things. He definitely enjoyed and had a need for speed. And so I'm not really sure why he got that, because that thing goes about 55 miles an hour at top speed. But I think we were shifting from maybe speed to just power, and that thing will literally crawl and drive over anything. So, but yeah. The FJ40, it's a the Land Cruiser behind me. It has a really cool story as far as how it came to be. So when Josh got shipped off for his deployment, he left it with someone in Fort Riley. I'm not even sure the gentleman that he left it with, but didn't get taken care of very well. And eventually after he passed, I think Leslie didn't know what to do with it. She was in Nashville. Their stuff was in Fort Riley, or in Kansas, and so some stuff had to get moved. So the truck came to Watkinsville, and my dad and I, we said, "Hey, we're gonna work on this thing. We're gonna make it." We didn't know what kind of shape it was in. So when we got it, didn't run. The engine was no good. It had been, anyways, it just had been kind of run down. And so we started getting onto the World Wide Web. We got on Google or whatever. Started looking at forums where we could learn how to diagnose it. And there's some really great Toyota forums out there. And so we started asking questions. And what really happened was this community, as we told the story of the truck, people started going, "Hey, there's these different groups. So there might be like a Land Cruiser Club of Atlanta, and they have a Help a Member a Month activity. So I think we became kind of the help a member, do a build. So they did an FJ build. And what's really cool is people came from, literally we had a guy come all the way from California. We had other people from other states, a lot of guys from Atlanta. And what's cool is the warehouse actually next door, local person here in town made that available to us. And so we hosted on a Saturday a bunch of people that came together after they heard this story about Josh and his vehicle and his son and all these things that had happened. They wanted to give back. They wanted to do something. And so we had this amazing day where we put a donated engine in because that engine was shot. We did brakes, we did all kinds of things, seats and roll cage. And the goal was to get this thing running. And so we were able to get it running after all these people came together to just love on our family and show respect. And I think people were honestly just wanting to say thank you to Josh, and his story is how I kind of interpreted it. So it was a special day for sure. So he lived a short life, but he lived a powerful life, and he touched a lot of people's lives. And I'm grateful for him, and for the example that he was able to set for me as a younger brother. I wish there was more to add to the story. I wish we had more time with Josh. I think that's kind of the part that still gets me is, obviously my personal beliefs we'll be together again, but we say life is short, but life is long too. It just depends on what day of the week you're on.
So he came home and worked for a while and met Leslie, his girl who was going to become his wife.
My name is Leslie Hardcastle. I was married to Josh Reeves from 2005 till 2007. We dated 3 years before that. So I first met Josh my freshman year of college at University of Georgia. There were a lot of things that were intriguing about Josh. He was very different than most of the guys I had known or dated. I think the thing that stood out to me the most about him was he did not care what anybody else thought. He was going to do what he wanted to do or what he felt was the right thing to do. He didn't really put much credence into others' opinions or society's expectations or any of those things. He followed rules that made sense to him and didn't necessarily follow ones that didn't. So I thought that might be interesting when he decided to go into the military, but that turned out to be a good move for him. But yeah, I loved that he was his own person. He marched to the beat of his own drum. He had all kinds of different interests, from scuba diving to camping to Civil War history. Like, he was just an interesting person to get to know. I spoke to Josh last couple hours after I had given birth to Jackson. He called. He knew that I had been going into the hospital that morning, and so he called, and I was able to tell him that Jackson had been born and how everything went, and that Jackson was okay. He heard him kind of fussing and crying, and we were able to talk for a few minutes. I remember I was having a hard time hearing him, and he said, do you want me to just call you back tomorrow? And I said, no, hold on just a minute. And I sent everybody out of the room, which I'm super thankful that I did. Because, I had no idea those were going to be the last couple of minutes that I had to talk to him. So I asked everybody else to go out of the room, and we had a couple minutes of private conversation. Um, and then, he said he would call me the next day, and we told each other, I love you, and that was it. Later on that evening, my friend and my dad were in the room with me, and my dad's phone rang, and he all of a sudden got really serious and got up and walked out of the room. And even then, I didn't have any sense that it had anything to do with Josh. But what had happened was the soldiers had gone to my parents' house to notify me. We weren't there because we were at the hospital, and the neighbors saw them, and the neighbors asked the soldiers if Josh had passed away, and they told them yes, which they're not supposed to do, but they did. And so then the neighbors called my dad and told him what had happened, and then my dad had to be the one to find out and tell me. The whole funeral experience was surreal. I had no idea that so many people not only knew about it, but cared enough to stand outside. I mean, the whole line from his parents' house all the way to the church, there were people lined up on the streets with flags, with signs. There were fire trucks out. There were, they had the road, it was a Georgia game day. So anybody that's familiar with what that's like, knows how much traffic and what a big deal. And they had the streets blocked off for us. It was overwhelming, amazing, surreal, crazy, just how many people were showing their support.
My name is Michael Luco, currently a Sergeant First Class with the Army. I met Josh in my first unit after arriving at Fort Riley, Kansas in December 2005. I didn't get to know Reeves very well very quickly. We started off in different platoons. I wouldn't get to know Josh for a few more months really well due to just normal mission requirements, and we were in different platoons. But after he ended up in an argument with his wife, he talked to command about getting a room in the barracks so they could cool off and talk about things without everything escalating. And he got stuck as my roommate, and that's when I really got to know him. I mean, he was a character. He liked joking around. He liked goofing off when he could. But he was also a really good soldier and was a lot of fun to work with and get to know. Josh was pretty much a be there with you kind of leader. Unless it was something really stupid, then he'd find a way out of it. But generally, if he was telling you to do it, he was willing to get in there too and get it done. He was shaping up to be a really good leader that would have been great to continue working with. He had a nice calm mentality most of the time. So he also listened really well to the guys. When we were on the job, it was sitting in a truck running convoys. Due to being in the heavy weapons platoon, we had a lot of convoy operations escorting equipment or personnel to different locations. So that was most of our time. Most of the time it ends up with really weird conversations within the truck because you were bored and needed to talk about something. Unfortunately, I was never actually in Josh's truck, so I never had some of those fun, weird conversations. But we had plenty on our off time, so it made up for it. For the most part of the deployment, it was pretty close quarters. Neighborhood to neighborhood, house to house. We had 2 or 3 gas stations in our sector that we started monitoring. But one of the missions we got later in the deployment was to secure and monitor the gas stations to stop the black market sale of gas that was funding the insurgency groups. And we were very effective at it, and they did not like that we did it. Leading up to that day, he was kind of a nervous wreck because his wife Leslie was about to give birth. He was super anxious about being a father. He constantly came to actually talk to my roommate, Derek Stinnett, because Derek was a father. So he was, hey, I need to pick your brain to calm down. So they would have long talks about kind of how to be a parent and what to look forward to. Some of Josh's concerns he did voice were due to him being adopted. He kind of had some concerns about could he be a good dad, which after meeting Josh's parents, he was going to be a great dad. His parents are great people. And he had the personality for it. He was going to do a good job. Unfortunately, he never really got the chance. But he came in to me and my roommate's room, and his opening statement when he opened the door was just complete kind of depressed look, and was just, my life's over. Naturally sends me and my roommate into a panic going, what the hell, dude? You're not a depressed kind of dude, so why's your life over? And then he looks at it and goes, my son was born. And that, our room got quite joyous. We were all super happy for him. But then he had to go get ready for his mission for that day. And unfortunately, that was the day he wouldn't make it back. I think he passed roughly about 12 hours after his son was born. When my son was getting ready to be born, I had already told my wife she loses any naming choices for at least the middle name. That it was going to be Reeves. I reached out to Josh's family and Leslie and made sure they were okay with it too. And yeah, his name is Orion Reeves Luco.
My name's Ralph Koslerich. During my time with the 1st Infantry Division at Fort Riley, Kansas, I was the battalion commander for 2nd Battalion, 16th Infantry Regiment, nicknamed the Rangers. I ended up retiring as a full bird colonel in 2014, which was about 7 years after we deployed in February of 2007 to Baghdad, Iraq, in support of the surge during that time. In 2005, I was selected to take command of a battalion that did not exist, and Josh Reeves was part of that formation in Delta Company and the creation of a organization that we ended up going then to Baghdad in February of 2007. And we were put in a position of which out of Fob Rustamaya to the east side of Sadr City, which was considered a very nasty area, probably one of the worst in Baghdad. So when we first arrived to Iraq, there had been no U.S. force that had really been able to gain a foothold within the neighborhood that we had, which expanded about 3 miles east to west, about 10 miles north to south. So it was a pretty significant piece of terrain that we were responsible for. And the most devastating weapon system was what was known as the explosively formed penetrator, which we referred to as an EFP. They figured out a way to deploy the EFP against American forces. And when it was tested in Aberdeen Proving Grounds, the EFP would blow through 20 feet of reinforced concrete. So the vehicles that we were driving in, it kind of cut through them like a hot knife through soft butter. But if you talk to Lucky Lookout, who's one of my favorite Rangers, he ended up an EFP, took off basically his foot when we were out doing a patrol. He was part of my personal security detachment that day. In that respect, not good. Yeah. So Josh died due to an EFP.
So my name is Derek Stinnett. I served with Josh in the Big Red 1. Actually, a little bit before that, we were in a division called Old Ironsides, and that was his first unit. I had been reassigned from Germany to Fort Riley, and that was really my second unit. But we had met there. We lived about 4 or 5 doors down from each other on post, and we were both privates, so we weren't making a ton of money. He had a wife, I had a wife, and 2 kids at the time, and we were complaining to each other really about, because we lived at the bottom of the hill because that's where all the privates lived at. And we were complaining about how much gas prices were, which kind of dumb when you look at them today. But it was a lot of money for us because, we didn't get paid a whole lot of money back then. So he said, hey, we do live a couple doors down from each other. So how about we work out a deal where, I'll drive 1 week and then you can drive the next week. And then that way we're not spending so much money on gas and stuff. So we were in different platoons. So it just kind of became like a riding buddy thing. And I didn't really expect a whole lot out of it. But anybody that knows him knew that he was expecting a lot out of it. And so we kind of became friends based on the proximity of our housing and, getting rides back and forth to work. We were both in the same job. So, we were both infantrymen. So that worked out. Had a lot of the same experiences and stuff. So that's kind of how we met. We were just able to connect on a level, and he's from a small town in Georgia. I'm from a small town in Illinois. And so we had a lot of the same upbringing and things in that regard. So we kind of clicked on a higher level than I had clicked with most people that I was friends with in the military. But we ended up going from that unit to 216 Rangers, the Big Red 1 unit. And then we deployed together out of that.
My name is Jake Harbin. I was airborne infantry in the U.S. Army from 2006 to 2008. I was a specialist by the time I got out. Served with the 216th Infantry, 4th Brigade. First ID out of Fort Riley, Kansas, and then out of Fob Rustamaya, Iraq, in East Baghdad. So Josh and I first met, I believe, right after they all returned from NTC, which is the National Training Center in California. And Josh and I weren't in the same platoon initially. He was in 1st platoon and I was in 2nd platoon. Then we both ended up in 4th platoon together, actually in Iraq. So that was kind of And that's when we actually really started to get to know each other, was when he became my squad leader. So we were quite a bit of our job while I was there was to guard those gas stations. And we just take regular rotations of shifts between 1st, 2nd, and 4th platoon typically. Especially for the last like 2 or 3 months I was there before I was wounded in September of 07. So I took blast wounds to both my feet. One piece of shrapnel hit my right foot, and it might have been the same piece of shrapnel that hit both of them, just depending because of where they were sitting in the vehicle. And yeah, my right one did damage to my metatarsals. They were able to do a small bone graft and fix it with skin grafts and debridement, that kind of stuff. So multiple surgeries there. My left one was a little more complicated. It cut my Achilles tendon. They were able to reattach it, but I had a calcaneal fracture in my heel, so they had to let that heal and then reattach it. So I just had kind of a floppy worthlessness around my bottom left leg for a while. So eventually I was in the hospital probably about 2 months, maybe 2.5 months. And my surgeon and I sat down together and we were able to discuss some different plans and options for me, one of them being reclassing into something that was non-combat related. He ended up recommending me for permanent disabled retirement. Part of the reason for my permanent disabled retirement was that there wasn't any fixing my feet further. Like, that's just, there they are. They're not going to get better with time. Josh as a leader, and his leadership style was kind of distinctive in that he wasn't really like that guy that's out there to prove, that they're the best, that they're trying to gain medals, that kind of, daring. Like, he was a lot more introspective, I guess. He was more concerned with everybody getting out okay, and rather than making a big name for himself. He certainly, I think, was a little bit stressed to be in the lead truck with us, but he relied on the fact that because we've been operating in the same area of operations as 1st platoon, but we were doing different missions, taking different routes. So he really trusted the other 2 of us in the truck to guide him until he really understood like the routes and the map. And so he was pretty humble in the sense that he didn't just come in and, well, I'm in charge. I thought it was a great disservice that they didn't posthumously promote him to sergeant. He did a sergeant's job, and he was a good one. As a squad leader, I'm not sure if everyone felt the same as I did about him, but he did his best under tough circumstances, and he was never a real jerk if he didn't have to be. I thought that was a great quality in a leader, and he wasn't afraid to jump out of the truck and get his hands dirty. He was, he definitely wasn't. Our previous sergeant had a reputation for being a real bad dude, which I thought was kind of a refreshing change of pace. He certainly was the nicest squad leader I've ever had. Josh and I really kind of bonded over a lot of just a familiarity of and a love of science fiction and fantasy and that kind of stuff. We both read quite a few books growing up, and we had a similar taste in music. There was certainly a level of stress that came along with going outside the wire. There was certainly a kind of general feeling of mild dread that that might be your last mission. And honestly, on the FOB, it wasn't necessarily a whole lot better. We took plenty of rocket fire and plenty of artillery fire. A couple of guys from my company were wounded. There were EFPs when we first started our missions. They were less common. They started to become the main form of IEDs that we saw, especially towards when I was wounded. And obviously Josh, that was what hit us that time. The first IED I was in was actually buried artillery shells, Russian artillery shells, like circa World War II, and they had daisy chained them and buried them they buried him a little too deep, and I think that's why none of us really got worse than concussions. But it picked our whole Humvee up. The day that Josh was killed and I was wounded, we were stationed at the gas station just on the north side of Pluto, right across the highway from Fob Rest of Mile, so maybe 200-300 yards away from the guard towers. At some point, someone was able to sneak up on our tiny little path that we used to get back and forth and plant an EFP. It's always been a little bit of a mystery how they were able to pull that off while being in view of the guard towers. We were just driving home at the end of the day. I remember Josh being really excited. His wife had just given birth to their son, Jackson. And it was about to be the first time that he had, it was going to be the first time that he'd spoken with her since. So he was really excited to get back to the FOB and go to one of the call centers, try and get a hold of his wife. And yeah, that was when we got hit, maybe 100 yards away from the entrance to the FOB. And I looked over and saw how Josh was doing, and he was in pretty bad shape. And he knew it. He knew he was in rough shape. Our interpreter actually was the one that jumped in the truck and started doing CPR on him right away. She was a really, really awesome gal. And gotta say, considering that wasn't part of her job description, that was really awesome of her to do that. The medic, our Doc White, jumped in and started helping too, and he got hit pretty hard. Bad timing, bad location. Maybe from the time the explosion went off to when we were landing at Baghdad International, maybe a half hour, maybe 40 minutes total. It was pretty efficient. They were just waiting to get us on the bird as soon as they could get a pulse out of Josh, and they did. And so that's why they threw us on the same helicopter together, and we both just landed and both went right into surgery. I didn't find out he died until I got out of surgery.
It was important to me to let Jake know that it wasn't his fault. And so I called his number, and he answered, and he said, "Hello." And I said, "Jake, I'm James Reeves. Josh is dead. Please don't hang up." Now, if Jake were telling this story, he might remember it a little differently than I do, but this is the way I remember it. I said, "Jake, please don't hang up." And there was silence. And I said, "You need to know that what happened to Josh wasn't your fault. You were doing your duty. It was not your fault." I read the autopsy when I got a copy of it, and it was so hard to read. But I needed to know. I needed to know what happened to my son. And I wanted to know to what extent did the medical professionals try to save him. Well, that question wasn't answered until I read a chapter of David Finkel's book, The Good Soldiers. That was his second, I believe. That might have been, no, that was his first. In that book, there's a chapter for each of the soldiers that lost their lives. And so reading Josh's chapter was hard. But it answered the questions, because David explained the valiant efforts of the medical professionals who tried to save my son's life. And I don't know who they are, but if they ever watch this, I want them to know how grateful I am for their effort. For their efforts in trying to revive my son, our son. He wasn't just another injured soldier to them. I mean, they didn't look at him and go, oh man, this guy's in bad shape. Who's next? They didn't do that. This guy's in bad shape. We need to work on it. We need to bring him back. Now, the stories that we've shared, I don't want people to think that he was perfect, because there was that one day. No, he wasn't perfect. He wasn't your average kid, but he wasn't perfect. And I don't remember him as being perfect. I remember him as one of my children. And in Josh's case, an American hero. Because he took an oath of enlistment to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I took the same oath. And an oath, it doesn't have an expiration date. But he took an oath, and he fulfilled that oath to protect the Constitution and protect our country until he can no longer do so. And in my mind, that's what a hero does.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. As I was walking that ribbon of highway, I saw above me that endless skyway. I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me. I've roamed and rambled, I've followed my footsteps to the sparkling sands of her diamond deserts. And all around me a voice was sounding. This land was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land.